It's Thursday, August 1st. We are at the Freiburg New Church Assembly. This is our second hour. I'm Gard Perry, and the title of my talk is How Do We Grow? To grow as community, we grow as individuals. And from our Biblical Week theme, the text is Blessings and Community Challenges in the Bible Now and Then. The Israelite community received both blessings and challenges from the Lord, from their creation with Jacob and all along their journey. This week we will look at the biblical blessings and challenges as lessons for us now to reflect on our own communal journey, our churches, our worlds, as we take steps toward the spiritual growth of each and new experiences of joy in community. So before I begin the prepared talk, I first wish to thank every single one of you for being here. It's a joy, it's a privilege, and it is my great pleasure to bring a few ideas for you to consider. I also want to thank Becky Greenwood. She knows that my title, How Do We Grow, comes from her April editorial, and in her role as editor of The Messenger, she wrote a provocative article. And I said, Becky, I loved your article. I'd like to borrow your title. She gave me permission. And I am going to bring her provocative self. I actually have to borrow a provocative self. tried to find one, and I couldn't. So Becky's provocative self comes in at the conclusion of the talk, as does the very, very skillful as well, somewhat provocative voice of a colleague. That'll be Tom Muller. I will bring his text forward toward the end. And a couple remarks on my experience of being here this week. A number of weeks after which I prepared the talk you'll hear, is that it's been so refreshing to be here in discussion groups and in the talks, of course. There's been a kind of deeply felt aspiration and a refreshing dose of reality. A friend of mine who used to say on occasion, when the occasion warranted, face reality squarely. I believe I and others are willing to do that in a whole new way, and it just seemed to happen within about a year. And of course, the reality of which I speak is that it appears to be the inevitable decline of some of our existing structures, of ways of being a church. They appear to be in our past and our present, but they do not look like they are going to be in our future. There are those who are setting out, I found this week, for a new future. They do so, I believe, with a kind of dose of courage. To the extent that I am able and I am here for that, I wish to join them. And for today, that them is you. Okay. One of the big ideas I've heard this week, by the way, it's a very big one, is that there appears to be need for a transformation of consciousness. That's so big. I would like, though, I'm so tempted. A wonderful speaker just a number of weeks ago introduced, before he began his talk, a liminal meditation. And it's a shift in consciousness, okay? And this is way less than a minute. We're talking 15, 20 seconds max. And what he invited those of us on this, happened to be a Zoom call, to do, and I invite you now to join me in this, for a few seconds. What you do is however you wish to, you may close your eyes, but you're going to become present to being here in this room. and I thank you for that. He called this, by the way, liminal meditation, and liminal is a word for a threshold. It's a doorway. And what he suggested when he did it was those of us who are here in the lecture hall walked into the lecture hall from one liminal space, and now, if you're willing, you may find that you're now in a listening space. Audience means listening. And I'll be my best self in a speaking space with you. Thank you. This talk was not an easy one for me to write. None of them have been. But this was a bit more difficult than most. Living most of my life solo, cautious in groups, and as an introvert, I have a relationship with community that, well, it's complicated. I was looking for the word individual in the theme in which to take refuge, but found it not. Undeterred, I supplied it in my title, and we'll talk about individuals in community. The hypothesis that guides this talk is that growing individuals cause growing communities. I find support for this hypothesis, as you will hear shortly, biblically in the Genesis account of creation, doctrinally in Swedenborg's treatment of the will and the understanding. And I will turn in a few words to what I see as Jesus' relation to community, to Swedenborg's relationship to community, and even to the Swedenborgian churches, as we now know it, relation to community. And by the end, I will ask you to weigh in to a central question of this talk, which is pretty straightforward. How do we grow? My own response is shaped by the idea that growing individuals cause communities to grow, with the result that growing communities are made up of growing individuals. Individuals remain free to accept others into their lives or not. The task of a community, as I might see it, is to be a safe, nurturing space that provides support for individuals to help them learn how to accept others into their lives. The biblical account of creation, as I read it, begins with the creation of the individual, albeit always in the context of community. And here early in the Arcana, also known as Secrets of Heaven, in his treatment of the 7 days of creation, we read in Swedenborg, as long as the mind confines itself to the literal sense alone of the letter, one cannot possibly see that the subject of Genesis, in the internal sense, is our new creation. That is, the new creation of individual human beings. The 6 days are so many successive states of regeneration. And then just a little bit longer idea here. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. The most ancient time, beginning in the ancient times, was always called a beginning. It's the first stage when an individual is being regenerated. For then we are born anew and receive life. Regeneration itself is called a new creation. The expressions in the word, in the literal sense of the Bible, to create, to form, and to make, in almost all parts, mean to regenerate. So the biblical record then starts with the regeneration of what is framed as an individual. Community comes up a bit later. I believe that individuals cause communities to grow. And here I might add is you like me might think that, well, that's pretty obvious. It's intuitively so in a manner of speaking. So I do find that to be the case, and that's why I wanted to highlight that one. There are so many different kinds of community, so many different kinds of individuals, and I really do mean this in the 21st century, that there are probably many ways that communities can grow. I simply highlight this one way, lifting up what I believe one of Swedenborg's greatest gifts is to paint a portrait of what a human being can be. It is such an aspirational vision, and it is so wonderful. I'll be talking a little bit about that coming up real quick right now. I believe that individuals cause communities to grow because individuals have agency. The will and the understanding, the agency to do something, to see it, to feel it, to know it, to do it, is kind of talked about in Swedenborg as the will. I want to do it, it needs to be done, and the understanding, and I think it looks like this is how it ought to be done, meaning how it can be done. What are the means? Do I need a shovel? Okay. So he talks about the will and the understanding as the internal ground upon which individuals plant seeds that grow and develop. When agency is moved by God's love and by love for the neighbor, people regenerate, and communities of which they are part, why they grow. Addressing himself to this idea, the importance of the will and the understanding, Swedenborg writes, everything that is in accord with loving and everything that is in accord with understanding others can be found within our will and our understanding. Everything that a person loves belongs to their will, and everything that they know belongs to their understanding. Indeed, these two faculties combine to be the place where people experience love for others, and it's the place where they can understand them. There are two kinds of love, Swedenborg goes on to say, that constitute heaven within a person. The two kinds of love that constitute heaven within a person: love of the Lord and love for the neighbor. They make heaven within an individual. They constitute heaven within an individual. And heaven, in my way of understanding this, and the sacred space within which we welcome others. I'm going to pause here. I'm reminding my liminal meditation friend. I'm offering this notion that heaven, what Swedenborg says, that heaven can be within the individual, and it's constituted within the will and the understanding by love for the Lord. That would correspond roughly to the will if I wanted to make that distinction. These distinctions could be made in a number of ways, but I'm making it this way for the moment. Love of the neighbor would more easily go in the area of the understanding. So we begin with love of the Lord, and then we meet a neighbor we wish to understand them so that we can love them better. So that's, and he said, Swedenborg tells us that constitutes heaven within an individual. That's a lovely, lovely image. I mean, that's aspirational. I go a little tiny bit further, and I suggest heaven within an individual is the sacred space within which they welcome others. I'm going to pause here, 15 seconds, no longer. Go into your liminal space, and from where you are right now, if you could take a moment to Imagine what it would be like to have to find a sacred space within which we welcome others. Thank you for that. There's a little bit of a shift there. This seems to be the way things work. Only a person can make needed changes in their own life. For Swedenborgians, change is always in the direction of learning how to love the neighbor more deeply and to understand the other more clearly. Individuals who learn to love others wisely are attracted to like-minded people and thereby find themselves with like-minded people in community. This makes sense because, not only because it's obvious, but this is the way I tend to read Swedenborg on the subject. Moreover, it is the only way I can understand, the only way for the time being, that I can understand my experience as I navigate daily life's joys and vicissitudes. So much for biblical images, doctrinal support, and personal biography with respect to this week's themes. What about the practical problem that I and others face when they wish to engage with the real-world community that we know as the Swedenborgian Church of North America? And by the way, its sister and brother branches, where we have company, and it's wonderful. I won't go into the naming process right now, but the larger new church movement is really composed of a number of communities now, which is a great blessing. So what about the practical question, which Becky raised in her editorial, by the way, How Do We Grow? She was talking about that organization, as I will in a moment. Some will say, but there's a problem. There's always an asterisk. Because when they say that there's a problem, in my experience so far this week, they always bring hope. There's a problem, yes. There's an opportunity. There's hope. An early form of the problem, as I see it, is that neither Jesus in his lifetime nor Swedenborg in his founded a community in the sense that we use the word today. They didn't need to. Jesus had his Judaism. It was in need of reform, yes, but very much the robust community within which Jesus lived and taught. Swedenborg inherited the Lutheran Church of Sweden. It too was in need of reform, which Swedenborg believed was his work to do. His teachings were and are framed for just such a purpose. Indeed, he provided no guidelines, no hint, no inclination of how to form a separate Swedenborgian denomination. No. Instead, he saw a universal church coming down to earth out of heaven. Understandably hard to organize that. The problem is compounded by the fact that our forebears in England adopted a denominational form of Christianity that has morphed in our day into a version of Protestant Christianity, which is, as reported by the Pew Research Center, sinking like a stone. Becky Greenwood, as editor of The Messenger, has weighed in on this topic, as has a Council of Ministers colleague, Tom Muller, who's written his ideas on this subject. So I shift now to face reality squarely. I've borrowed this provocative self, by the way. It feels good. I might practice this. Tom Muller writes this way. So I will tell you when I'm not quoting from him. A shrinking community. For the past century, the Swedenborgian Church of North America has been in steady decline. Our numbers have dwindled. Many churches and societies have been dissolved. And many are in what a cynic might refer to as hospice care. It is easy and at times even justified to have a negative or pessimistic outlook on the future of our denomination. I do not have such an outlook, writes Tom. It does not come from ignorance nor wishful thinking. I do not believe Swedenborgianism is dying. Nor do I believe that the role and mission of our denomination will wane if, in the foreseeable future, if in fact we do go through a process of vestation that is ultimately part of the loss of structures as we now know them, but part of a revival of actual Swedenborgianism. Let me elaborate, writes Tom, on what I mean by that. Why the decline? Folks have different theories as to why this dramatic decline has occurred. Common response is that it is simply part of the overall decline in overall organized religion and Christianity in this particular era across the Western world. This, to me, is true, and to some degree, in a very real way, it is of our own making. In the middle of the 20th century, the notion that adopting our style and content and presentation to that of the mainline liberal Christianity seemed like a wise move to make. The mainline was doing well. Seemed like a decent example of how to maintain our membership and to speak to a broader population, to not be seen as strange or weird or too alternative. Swedenborgians, particularly in convention, decided it would be a good idea to de-emphasize the distinctness and the uniqueness of our tradition. It seems to Tom that they decided it would be better to hide Swedenborg. Consequently, a classic response I've received from folks, and I'm sure you have, is this felt like any other liberal Protestant Christian service on a Sunday morning. This is a major shot in the foot, perhaps even the head, to be honest, writes Tom. It did not work. We jumped onto a sinking ship, which is not our ship to begin with. Swedenborgianism, by the way, writes Tom, is by its very nature neither Protestant nor mainline. We consequently joined the decline of members, relevance, and popularity. If we look at this in a concrete way, we can imagine a hypothetical town, city, or neighborhood in which a Swedenborgian church exists and works with the mainline model. Why would someone want to go there, other than people who have been involved for decades, or if not for generations? Why would they want to participate and join this community? If it offers effectively this, does it offer effectively the same thing as your local liberal UCC church or Methodist or Episcopal church? Probably not. Why would someone want to attend a Swedenborgian church? While also in decline and struggling with the UCC, Methodist and Episcopals, they're at least likely to have nicer facilities, a larger congregation, childcare, support groups, and a full-time minister. There simply is no market for Swedenborgianism if it puts on the facade of a cultural and religious movement which is dying, just like Swedenborg predicted. Now, he's almost done, and I'm actually feeling a need to pause partly for myself. He is writing about what now appears to me, especially after being here this week, a way of thinking of Swedenborgianism that is already in the past. This is no longer our future, our present even. It's a caricature of what the Swedenborgian Church of North America has been over the last 40 years. But this caricature of which Tom is writing itself has almost already disappeared. But I like being provocative now, so I'm going to continue being provocative. I think that's a useful note to make. Because we're already in the future. I think we're already in the future, and this is all in the past, everything I've just said. But he continues, when acknowledging that there is no market for Swedenborgianism light in an ill-fitting outfit of mainline Protestant Christianity, one ought then offer an alternative. What kind of church is there? What kind of church is there that can be a niche that is not currently being filled? Who are the kind of people that would be drawn to and truly benefit from what Swedenborgian societies, groups, churches can offer? The answer, of course, is manifold, admits Tom, and includes a variety of people. Many varieties of people can truly benefit from what the Swedenborgian church has to offer. We're many varieties of people, and we can benefit. So that's Tom Muller. I shift now to my response to happily having read Becky Greenwood's, our beloved editor of The Messenger, April editorial titled, How Do We Grow? And she writes, Sunday services do not work for most young active families. And you know what? That's okay. Catholic families in our town have 4 different times over the weekend that they can go 1 mile down the street and participate in worship. And you know what? That's great for them. It does not work for most Swedenborgian families. Our closest location to worship in person is 30 minutes away, which is a lot closer than most Swedenborgian families. Our family, like others, as a rule, does not attend Sunday worship services. Rather, we look forward all year to the extended periods of time, camps, retreats, conventions, that we spend with our like-minded friends and spiritual community. It keeps us going. So why do I inherently feel guilty that we don't attend Sunday services? Aha, Becky asked this question. I love it. Ultimately, this mentality needs to change. We need to find multiple options for worship, community, for use in all walks of life, wherever we are. Our Swedenborgian denomination is so special, so unique. We need to embrace that, show that. The standard format is not conducive to that. So how do we grow, she asks. Well, we keep looking for pockets, enclaves that do make us special. We're an atypical church. We embrace that. But we cannot, as a family, and she speaks for others, commit to the societal norm of church. I implore our spiritual communities to keep looking toward the future, writes Becky. What is next? How do we find a way of worship in younger people and in families that works in their insanely busy lives? We have an abundance, quote unquote, we have an abundance of outside-the-box thinkers. We can do it. We can not only succeed, but thrive. So I said to Becky after reading that, okay, Becky, I'm going to read that. That's going to be the conclusion of my talk. Because we have an abundance of out-of-the-box thinkers here. And by the way, before I summarize quite briefly and then turn it over to you, so kind of start getting warmed up, okay? Yeah. While I'm getting ready to summarize, what I learned this week is we already are making real progress in this direction. The stereotypical past of which Tom Muller was writing is actually already in the past. That was an echo from the past. this outfit here, the Freiburg New Church Assembly, is one of the places that is working. And we have an abundance of out-of-the-box thinkers, yeah. So I promised her, okay, I'm going to bring this to our community in this week. And now, as you get warmed up, to raise your hands, and I think Susanna will probably operate the mic. Though I have brought my more provocative self, or perhaps more accurately say, though I have borrowed a provocative self for this talk, and I have offered a withering critique, I have also brought a hopeful and open heart. I am not alone in loving the Swedenborgian Church just as it is. As a denomination, it has brought wisdom and love to a lot of people, among whom I find you and myself. The structures that no longer work are in our past. They can be supported in the present, but they appear not to be in our future. It is your turn to weigh in on what you think the future holds for the Swedenborgian movement as an institution, and for the Freiburg New Church Assembly, if you wish. How do you answer? How do we grow? How do you answer? Thank you. So, I'm sorry, what? Oh, I thought maybe. Okay, so Dave has the mic. Maybe he'd just raise that just for a second.
Susanna has again asked me to fill in, and I'm happy to do it.
Okay, great. Thank you. So, there we are. Okay, so I see two hands. I actually saw Jesse first, followed by Debbie.
So hi, it's Jesse. I have a question because I know there's a lot more online now, including the Spiritual Sunshine, or I'm not sure if it's still called that. So I'm just curious how those types of things are doing, if anyone knows about that, because that was one form of reaching out to more people.
Okay, so I'm going to ask someone in the audience who is probably very skillful. I think there are a number of people very skillful in that area to reply to Jesse's question, which I'll repeat while someone is thinking of raising their hand and saying how the online world is responding to this question. So do I have a volunteer to throw out some ideas? Susanna looked like she could do it. No. Oh, I don't think it. Okay, so Becky has a reply.
I'm right here, Dave. Emily's actually a better responder to this, since she sat on the Spiritual Sunshine board for the past couple years. Corey does well with reaching about 1,000 people in his virtual ministry, but what's tricky with it is it's his version is mostly like YouTube videos, so you don't get the same kind of interaction. It's not actually building membership or anything like that, but it's building a following online, which is really also important. And then Colin has been working on the Rainbow Church from California, but it's also a virtual church that's really focused on interacting with the LGBTQ plus community and making our church and our visions more accessible to those people who are not comfortable walking into a church building. It's not necessarily right now building membership again, but that's a different mindset. It's building awareness of what we are and what we offer and how unique we are as a perspective. And those are our virtual ministries. And like what Sage is working on is another type of virtual ministry. And the mindset is moving forward that we have to focus on this or we're going to lose everything, because we are so far flung. And we have 28 churches in the whole North America. That's not going to keep, and we closed 1 or 2 this year again. So we have to think about how to move next outside of just, I'm not saying don't have churches. That's not the thing. It's what else can we do to bring us together? And my whole thing has been, how successful, I mean, I have not attended Paul Haven. They're trying to restructure into a family camp also. But how successful Almont and Freiburg are as communities. And they don't meet all the time. Some people do. Some of us meet year-round to talk about how do we make this section of the time that we are together special and unique and still remain with traditions. But the denomination is starting to recognize that how important these camp experiences, the gathering leaves experience, all these retreat type experiences are to who we are as a group. And that's what actually is building our stronger community. I hope that answered some of that.
Okay, thank you. Debbie was next. If you have a thought you'd like to share on the larger question, no, Debbie's first and then Katie.
Hi, this is Debbie. I'm thinking about how important community is to feeling like the church is important, because the church is people, and the church is gathering together and sharing with people like ideas. And I'm blessed with the fact that there's a church nearby where I live. And I do find that it's really important for me to gather together with people that have similar beliefs. And camp is really special because of the intensive time that you can spend together to build community. And I've always loved retreats and camps, but I also find that I need through the year to be fed by going to church. Now, I will say that my children do not go to church. So how do they stay into a church community and where church is important to them? Or let's not say church, but say religious ideas.
Good for you. Thank you. Katie's next.
I have so many thoughts swirling about this, so I surely won't get to them all, but I'll try to touch on a couple. This is a conversation that I'm 46. This is a conversation, and I have a child who's 12. And so I feel like this is a conversation that has been happening since I've been able to listen to the conversation. It's not a new problem. It's not a new idea. So I think we all feel that. Just to share some more personal information, I worship with a group of, they like to call themselves radical Mennonites because they are open and affirming and LGBTQ welcoming. So basically, my upbringing as a Swedenborgian, learning from summer camps primarily, and sometimes being in a location where there was a church, of a Swedenborgian church, and so experiencing that a little bit. My Swedenborgian heart of my learning was that then I would seek out communities that had open enough values. They were liberal enough, frankly. They were open and welcoming enough, frankly. They weren't dogmatic in a way that was harmful. Christianity wrought large, Christendom, if you will, has done so much harm. And I also want to say I'm an early childhood educator. I teach 3 to 6-year-olds in a Montessori environment, which has its own lovely spiritual vibe, if you will, if you're familiar with it at all. And young children do not thrive online. So I need to say that loud and clear. And I think if you have had children, you know they need to be with other children. They need to be in community. They need to know what it's like, just the same as they need to pick up sticks and rocks and work with their hands. They need to work with peers. And so we must think about what opportunities, and summer camp is a great one because my son has found his best friend here at Freiburg, and it's wonderful. And we were talking even about how it's hard to keep that going through the year, that connection. But for that reason, we should strive to not see online as the only solution. And that's it.
So, thank you, Trevor.
All right, this is Trevor. A couple of things. Online is one of the frontiers that we are trying to use, but as Katie said, there's other ways. But I'm going to talk about online. Nancy and I aren't anywhere near any of our denominational churches, and we attend services online every week. We go to church here in Freiburg, and several of our churches have an online presence, and some of them are streaming and some of them are live. And we picked one that's live so we can actually interact with people there. I get to do the Bible readings once a month for the Freiburg Church, and I'm not anywhere near Freiburg, Maine.
Yeah.
And so this kind of interaction has been really important to both of us, and we've been accepted, and we feel like we're part of the Freiburg Church, and they treat us as if we are. I mean, and it works very well for us, and the other people that come online, it works for them as well. And it's grown the membership of their church, and you know, if someone's sick or hurt, they can still go to church even if they're local, because they can just turn on our device and go to church. And so it works really nicely. The other thing that I really think we should mention is Off the Left Eye. Off the Left Eye does videos explaining Swedenborgian theology in modern day terms with animation and discussion and interviews and all sorts of other stuff, and they have millions and millions of views. And it's not church, it's spirituality,
Right.
and it's very different.
Thank you, Trevor. Colgate and Sage, is that a hand?
I don't think I'll make much sense, but because it's an organized religion, it has a lot of parts and a lot of things, right? And it seems to me going forward, I think about my thoughts about being useful for others, right? Allows me to move away from myself when I'm trying to figure something out for myself. It's a very beautiful fundamental thing, and I think going forward it may be one or two of those things we start to talk about, so that you build community. You need community to externalize a little bit once in a while, because in your mind you're faulty, you take shortcuts, you don't use full sentences. Yeah, but if I have to talk to Gard, I have to make a full sentence. It has to make, and when I get done talking to Gard, he doesn't have to say a word, because I knew I screwed up. It's my reasoning is faulty. So we need community. We need a place to externalize. But as we go along, maybe the church has to move forward by taking one or two of the principles that allow people to get engaged in the community, and then we build as they learn more. So it's like, what is the message? We're still talking about church here. What is the message that it can sort of build itself on and build up from? That seems to be important.
Thank you, Colgate. Dave Sage has her hand up. Ooh, you better be careful. Better be careful, I might call on you. You don't want me to though, right? That's okay, I won't.
This is Sage. I know I get to talk a lot this week, so I'm not going to say a bunch, but the structure that I'm just really excited about is the combination of a virtual doorway and then in-person camps and retreats. That's the doorway that got me into here, was going to SCYL retreats. And I think we do need that physical connection. And I think there are the virtual connection is the way that we can create doorways. And I think there are more intimate ways to connect online. I agree that small children are not equipped for that kind of interaction. And I think small children, they're happy at the Episcopal Church learning the Bible stories. There are other places where they can get that connection. But I think I'm excited to see a time when we're gathering even more broadly in things like camps. I think we could have, there's a lot of opportunities for meeting up in person, but then finding each other in a virtual sanctuary.
Yeah. Okay, thank you, Sage. Susanna has one. I have a comment I would like to make. It's a kind of a question, and then someone else raise your hand, because we're going to be up to time in 5 minutes.
I just want to recall that when I was at Temenos, which is a retreat center, in the lobby we had the brochures about the Swedenborgian Church and Swedenborgian theology, And then we had Gestalt groups and yoga groups and meditation groups. And the question that people sometimes would have in their minds is, what kind of church supports these activities? And that's how they would come in to discover Swedenborgianism, is because of our openness to have alternative ways to gather. And even though they might have just come in for one reason, they were really looking for a spiritual home. And some of the longtime members now are people who came in that way through the groups that the church hosted.
Yeah, thank you. So I'll take a moment. Someone raises their hand, I will recognize you. Okay, Becky after me. So I took a bit of a risk, not only by borrowing a provocative self, but by introducing, albeit a 15-second liminal meditation, wherein the notion was, so I have a question for you. It's just kind of yes or no. I'm not, it's the notion that our consciousness can shift pretty much moment by moment. And it can shift from one, it calls it liminal space, which is simply a room, into another room, kind of, to use a metaphor. And so I thought, well, I kind of want to borrow that. And I did it at the beginning, where the notion was we were all arriving. So let's take a moment to arrive as listeners and speakers in a talk that's going to begin now. Wow, different space. And then I did it second time with this notion that Swedenborg says a person whose loves are in accord with divinity and the neighbor, love from the Lord and of the Lord, and love for the neighbor, hey, they can create a heaven within themselves. And heaven is a space within which we can welcome others into our interior space. Okay. Did anybody have I'm really just asking for a yes or no kind of, you raise your hand. Did anybody experience a slight shift in consciousness when those were done, either at the beginning or middle? Yes or no? Okay. All right, well, we could work on that a little more intentionally, maybe. Yeah, I was too scared to do longer. I'm sorry. Yeah, okay. Okay, you're in it. Okay. Right. Are you in between two spaces right now, maybe? Okay. All right. Okay, next time it's going to be a minute. All right.
I still have the microphone. You forgot about me.
Oh, that's right. Becky's got the last word because we're at time. Thank you.
I'm going to bounce off of Sage and Katie a little bit. The youth is what, obviously I'm a mom of tweens right now, so it's really forefront to my mind, but it has been since they were born, really. They're the most important thing. They are priming the pump for our future here, everywhere. And the online, they play online, but it's totally different than what they do together. And it's really important to have the balance of both. But like from my own perspective, the Sunday school, like sure, I'm still Facebook friends with people I went to Sunday school with in regular church, but I'm not friends with them. My people and my friends are the people who are from the retreats and the camps, and they're the long time thing. So I think that figuring out how to continue to put the kids together wherever they are is really what's most important to the future of our church.
Thank you, Becky. And with that, we are free to move about the cabin.